The Roberts Bank Terminal Expansion Project is a multi-billion-dollar port extension in Vancouver that would double the port's current size and increase trade capacity. The project is led by the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, VFPA, a federal agency responsible for the stewardship of federal port lands in and around Vancouver, British Columbia. The project involves the construction of a new 3-berth marine container terminal in Delta, British Columbia, in deep, subtidal waters to minimize environmental effects. The terminal will be funded by the Port Authority and private investment, not tax dollars. The project is expected to play a critical role in supporting Canadian trade, as Canada's Pacific Gateway is Canada's most important trade corridor, with over $275 billion of trade passing through the VFPA each year. In the coming years, the government believes Canada's major West Coast ports will reach maximum capacity, meaning congestion will become a chronic issue. This project would increase the port's capacity by 50% and prevent $3 billion in added GDP from being jeopardized by capacity shortages. The project is also expected to create hundreds of jobs during construction, and several hundred more both on-site and off-site during operations. The project has received approval from the Government of Canada in April 2023, subject to 370 legally binding conditions to protect the environment, local wildlife and land use activities of Indigenous peoples. These include over 100 measures protective of local wildlife, such as developing habitat creation programs to support western sandpiper populations and other shorebirds, development and implementation of an adaptive management approach to prevent negative effects to biofilm, limiting in-water construction to the window of least risk for several marine species, requirement for zero-emission cargo handling equipment on-site and to offer electrical power to vessels while berthed, installation of infrastructure to permit the safe passage of fish, requirement to avoid, mitigate and offset effects to fish and fish habitat and develop a follow-up program to monitor any impacts to the region's salmon as a result of the project, creation of a marine mammals detection and response plan to protect marine mammals during construction, and consultation and engagement with Indigenous groups and local communities throughout the project's life cycle. However, the project has also faced opposition and criticism from various stakeholders, including environmental groups, Indigenous groups, local residents and competing port operators. Some of the main concerns raised by opponents include the potential impacts of the project on the ecological integrity of Roberts Bank, which is home to millions of migratory birds, endangered southern resident killer whales, salmon and other marine life, the infringement of Indigenous rights and title over their traditional territories and resources, the increase in greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution from increased shipping traffic and port operations, the lack of economic justification and viability of the project given the existing capacity and alternative options for port expansion, and the lack of transparency and accountability of the VFPA as both a proponent and regulator of the project. Therefore, the Roberts Bank Terminal Expansion Project is a controversial and complex issue that could threaten Indigenous rights in Canada, as well as have significant environmental, social and economic implications for the region and the country. The Roberts Bank Terminal Expansion Project is not only a threat to the Indigenous rights of the Lummi Nation, who live across the border in the United States, but also to the environment and the wildlife of the Salish Sea. The project would double the size of the existing port, creating an artificial island and 3 new shipping berths near the Canadian-US border. The port lies in a key habitat for endangered southern resident killer whales, the ailing Chinook salmon they rely on for food, and dozens of other at-risk species. According to environmental groups, the project could have damaging effects on the ecosystem, such as increasing underwater noise, disrupting fish migration, destroying eelgrass beds, and altering water currents. These impacts could further endanger the survival of the southern resident killer whales, which are already facing multiple threats from pollution, vessel traffic, and food scarcity. The Chinook salmon, which are the main prey of the whales, are also declining due to overfishing, habitat loss, and climate change.